Welcome to the internet, your gateway to adventure.
I guess there's really no point in beating around the bush, so, I'm just gonna get straight to it. There's a dead body in my basement. No, I'm not kidding. It's the God's honest truth. And here's the thing. It's been there for over a week. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, dude, that's fucked up. And you're right, it is. But I can assure you, there's a perfectly valid reason for why it's still there. I cannot call the cops. Pretty obvious, right? Well, actually, it's not. And I'll explain why in a minute. But let me fill you in on the details first. About a week ago, I was taking some dirty laundry down to the basement. I wasn't suspecting anything to be out of the ordinary. I mean, why the fuck would I? I'm just taking some clothes down to the basement, right? So I walk down the stairs and I make my way over to the light switch on the other side. And oh boy, do I get the shock of a lifetime. There's a guy dressed in a suit and tie lying on his back in the middle of the floor. His hands are folded together like he's praying, and he's got a big knife sticking out of his chest. To say I was God-smacked would be the understatement of the century. I couldn't move. I just stood there, completely frozen, staring off at the guy like a retard. The first semi-coherent thing that passed in my brain about 20 seconds later was that it had to be, a practical joke. Some of my friends would come running out with a camera and big grins, smiling, saying, "Gotcha, dumbass." And I wish that had happened. But no such luck. There was no one else there. It was just me and Mr. Mysterious Dead Guy. And that's when the enormity of it finally hit me. I nearly had a heart attack. And can you blame me? There I was in my own basement, thinking everything is fine and dandy. And wham! Flippin' bam! Stumble across a dead body. So a couple of minutes go by and I'm slowly starting to come out of the daze I'm in and working up the necessary courage to go over there for a closer look. But as I approach the guy, I have second thoughts. So I stop, turn around, and grab a hammer from the tool shop behind the staircase. Don't ask me why, it's just what I did. Then I go back to the body, and that's when I saw his eyes were open. And my heart skipped a beat. It's creepy enough having a dead body in your basement, but it's even creepier having a dead body with its eyes open. Anyway, I walked a little closer and I see the bluest eyes I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like they're made out of polished ice. And they're staring straight up at the ceiling like the owner had just seen a goddamn ghost up there. So I stand where I am for a few minutes, wondering, what do I do now? And all of a sudden I decide to check if he's got any ID on him. I mean, that's what they do on TV, right? Figure out who the victim is and all that stuff. So I take a few deep breaths and kneel down next to the guy and start going through his pockets. I'm careful not to touch him, which is actually fairly easy if you take your time. Then, about a minute into the search, I finally had what I was looking for. A wallet. And that's when all fucking hell breaks loose. As I'm going through the contents of his wallet, the light goes out. I'm cast into complete darkness. I mean, I can't even see an inch in front of me. All I manage to say is, Jesus Christ. And then a cold hand locks itself around my wrist and starts to squeeze. If you have ever been truly scared, and I mean really scared, then you can multiply your experience by 10, and you'd know how I felt. And yeah, you guessed it, I wet my pants. There was nothing I could do to stop it. It just came pouring out like water from a garden hose. Then I sucked in a couple gallons of air and nearly passed out. So there I was, my heart doing somersaults inside of my chest. I could feel the taste of blood and sulfur in my mouth, and I got a cold hand wrapped around my wrist. So what do you think I do next? Well, I panicked, of course. I completely lost it. I tried to jump up on my feet, but the hand was holding me tight and didn't secede a millimeter. There was no way I was going to be able to stand up. Then wham! Another hand locks onto my arm, just above where the other one is. And that's when I started screaming from the top of my lungs. I was like a wild animal. I was kicking and screaming, hitting the hands, trying to free myself. But it was no use. It was like my arm was stuck in a vice. Then, the hands try to pull me closer, and I go mental. I throw myself backwards and kick the guy repeatedly, trying desperately to break free. I throw my arm behind me, hoping to find something I can grab onto, and that's when my hand bumps into the hammer. Come to think of it, it was a lot more like slamming into the hammer. I hit it with such force that I should be writhing in pain, but the adrenaline numbed the sensation. I was able to ignore it. Hell, I bet you I could have even taken a few sucker punches straight to the head and still kept going. So I finally realized what it is after fumbling around for it with my hands for a second or two. I managed to get hold of it, and then something inside of me takes over, and I go straight into autopilot mode. My arm starts swinging full force, and the hammer keeps striking the guy repeatedly. It was almost like, kind of like witnessing a psycho bashing the crap out of someone on TV, and not really caring one iota about what happened to the victim. I just wanted to get out of there. I probably kept at it for a good minute. Then I noticed the guy's hands had relinquished their grip on my arm. So I jumped up and bolted across the room and managed to run straight into the wall and almost knocked myself out cold. But I remained conscious. Then I ran over to the stairs and up to the kitchen, where I threw myself into the corner and assumed the fetal position. Well, actually, I pushed a heavy cabinet up against the door first, just to make sure. So I sit there for almost half an hour, hyperventilating and sweating bullets, until I'm finally able to think coherent thoughts again. Then I grab a torch and a new bulb, and I return to the basement. The hand holding the torch is shaking like a vibrator, but I'm able to hold on to it. The first thing I do is shine the light on the guy's face, just to make sure he's still there. He is. His face looks like an overinflated punching ball, covered in blood, mucus, and bruises. Then I grab a stepladder and change the light bulb and approach the guy for a second inspection. And this time, I make sure to stay half a dozen feet away. And that's when I notice it. His hands are in the exact same position as they were when I first saw him. They're folded together on top of his chest. It's like he never moved them, or never grabbed my arm. I shake my head in disbelief and blink a few times, thinking my eyes are doing a trick on me, but they're not. His hands really are folded together, which means he must have done it while I was bashing him with the hammer, or someone else latched onto my arm. The thought scares the shit out of me. I quickly snatch the hammer off the floor and raise it above my head. I start going through every inch of that basement. I make sure to take my time, and I do a thorough search, but the basement is empty. It's just the two of us down there. So I go back upstairs again, and that's when I realize what a predicament I managed to get myself into. If I call the cops, they'll automatically assume that I killed the guy, and I'll get locked up for life. And if there is one place I don't want to go, it's the penitentiary. For, as folks around these parks jokingly refer to it, the penitentiary, emphasis on the penetration. Guys like me, who's only 5'10" and weighs in just shy of 150 pounds, generally don't have a good time in places like that, if you get my drift. And that's when I realize I have to get rid of the body. That's the only way, and that's where I'm at now. It's been exactly 1 week since I punched the guy's ticket, and there's been no mention of him in the media, so I guess he wasn't that popular, and thank God for that. I don't think I could have put on a straight face if the cops came knocking on my door. I'm not going to lie, the last week has been pure hell. The memory of the ordeal never leaves me. It's like a dripping faucet. It doesn't matter how hard I turn the tap, it just can't stop. But I think I've managed to deal with it pretty well. I don't think I've given anyone a reason to suspect that I've recently bashed someone to death with a carpenter's hammer. I've also reached a decision as to how I'm going to solve this problem. Although it's not something I'm looking forward to, But hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? I've been down to the local hardware store and acquired 2 new handsaws, some heavy-duty bin liners, duct tape, and a hazmat suit. Items that will come in handy for what I've got planned. It'll probably take me all night, but I don't think I'll run into any major problems. All I can say is thank God it's winter and the temperatures are in the low 20s. Everything should be frozen solid by now, so there won't be that much of a mess to clean up afterwards. I've also done a few searches online. I've got a good idea of how to dispose of various evidence, but that's not something I'm going to share with you. That's a secret I'll take to my grave. Well, I think that about covers it. Please wish me luck. If everything goes according to plan, I might just be able to get away with it, and with time, put this entire mess behind me. If not, you'll see my face in the papers and on TV before you know it. So if it comes to that, how will you recognize me? Well, that's a pretty easy question to answer. I'll be the little white guy looking straight into the camera, protesting my innocence.